The richest man in the building is the one everyone quietly feels sorry for. His name does not matter. Call him Cab. He drives a 2013 Accord with a dent in the door he never bothered to fix. He parks at the far end of the lot, in the spot nobody fights him for, and walks in carrying the same soft-cornered lunch bag he has carried for longer than most of his coworkers have worked there. When the office orders out, someone always offers him a slice. The way you offer it to a person you assume can't quite afford their own. He says no thanks. Every time. They think it's pride. It is not pride. Cab could walk into his manager's office this afternoon, say 4 sentences, and never need another paycheck for the rest of his life. The house has been paid off for years. The accounts crossed $2 million a while ago and have not slowed down since. Cab is the wealthiest person in that building by a distance none of his coworkers could imagine, and he has spent 19 years making certain not one of them could tell. He is not cheap. He is not broke. He is doing one quiet thing on purpose, a habit that looks like poverty from the parking lot and is quietly building a fortune from the inside. You know a Cab. You work with one. You're related to one. You may be married to one. Or the version that stings slightly more, you used to be one, back before the money got comfortable enough to start spending itself. Here is the entire secret, with nothing hidden in it. Cab never let his life get more expensive than it was the day he started. That is the whole thing. Most people do the opposite, without ever consciously deciding to. The raise arrives and the car gets a little nicer, the bonus lands and the apartment gets a little bigger. The promotion comes through and the old furniture suddenly looks shabby. The old phone suddenly feels embarrassing. The old life suddenly feels too small for the new title sitting on the business card. The money shows up. The lifestyle opens its mouth and swallows it. Every time, you have watched this happen to people you love. The cousin who landed the better job and somehow has less breathing room now than she did when she was broke. The friend who doubled his income and still texts on the 28th asking if you can spot him until payday. Cab watched it too. And earlier than most people get the chance to, he made a strange decision. When his income went up, his life would stay exactly where it was. He kept living like the version of himself who earned half as much, and he let the difference pile up somewhere quiet, out of sight, out of reach, year after year. That gap between what he earned and what he allowed himself to spend was never a side effect of the strategy. It was the entire strategy. Not the salary, not a lucky bet, not a side hustle that took off. The gap. And the habit is nothing more elaborate than refusing for decades to let it close. The rule: wealth is not built by what arrives. It is built by what is allowed to stay. The gap between income and spending is the only mechanism that has ever reliably produced it, and it is available at every income level to anyone willing to hold a number frozen while the world tells them, repeatedly, that the upgrade is the reward for finally arriving. Call him Danny. You already know 3 of him. Danny waited 4 years for a promotion. When it finally came, it added roughly $800 a month to his take-home pay. He earned every dollar of it, and the night the news arrived, he stood in his kitchen and felt, for the first time in a long while, like he could finally breathe. So he breathed. A nicer lease, because he'd earned it. A bigger grocery run, the good coffee, the better gym. A couple of subscriptions he meant to cancel, and never quite did. None of it was reckless. Each piece felt small, reasonable, deserved. Within about 4 months, the $800 was simply gone, dissolved into a life that felt normal the instant he reached it. Here is the part nobody warned Danny about. He was not happier. The promotion he had wanted for 4 years bought him the exact same Sunday night dread, just at a slightly higher altitude. Now picture the version of Danny who did nothing. Same car, same apartment, same coffee. He takes the $800 a month, feeds it quietly into a plain index fund, and forgets it exists. At an ordinary market return, over 30 years, that one boring choice becomes close to $1 million. Not from luck, from a raise he had already earned and simply chose not to feel. That is the entire tragedy of lifestyle creep, and it almost never feels like a tragedy while it's happening. It feels like finally living. Every raise allowed to lift the life is a withdrawal made from a future version of yourself who will never get to meet the money that was supposed to be theirs. Danny did not lose the money in a crash. He lost it on things that felt like breathing. The rule: every raise arrives twice, once as income and once as a decision. The decision determines which version of you receives it, the one living today or the one who would have received it 30 years from now, compounded into something the present version of you will never be able to imagine wanting more than the upgrade felt in the moment, like it was worth. The loudest place this habit shows up is the driveway, because the car is the one thing the entire world can see. Cab's manager leases a new blacked-out SUV every 3 years, roughly $700 a month. He will be making a payment until the day he retires, because there is always a next lease waiting at the end of this one. To everyone in that parking lot, the manager is the one who made it. Cab is the one who didn't. Run the actual numbers, and the picture inverts completely. Cab bought a reliable used car for $15,000 and drove it for a decade. The difference between his transportation cost and his manager's, call it $500 a month, went straight into the market instead of into a metal object that loses value while it idles at a red light. From age 25 to 65 at historical market returns, that one ordinary swap is worth approximately $1.3 million. A new vehicle loses roughly a tenth of its value the moment it leaves the lot, close to 20% within the first year, nearly half by year 5. The manager is not buying transportation. He is renting a feeling, and the feeling wears off by the second oil change while the payment never does. The average new car payment in the country recently crossed $770 a month. The manager has the badge on the hood and a small knot in his stomach every time the statement lands. Cab has the boring car and a number in an account that means he will never have to feel that knot again. Same parking lot, 2 completely different lives. The one that looks like winning is the one quietly losing. The rule: a car cannot be both a status signal and an asset. It is always one or the other, and the world has been trained to read the signal as the opposite of what it actually represents. The badge is the receipt for money already spent. The boring car is the receipt for money that is still working. The same habit shows up in the house, except the numbers here are large enough to ruin people, and they do. Think of a couple you actually know. The income climbed steadily for years. They did exactly what they were told they were supposed to do. The dream house, the good zip code, the kitchen island. The rooms they pictured filling with an entire life. And from the day they received the keys, something quietly went wrong. The mortgage consumed 40% of their take-home pay. Then closer to 50% once the property taxes, the insurance, and the things that inevitably break in a large house were added in. They had the square footage and almost nothing left to live inside it. You have sat at their table. You have felt it even if you couldn't name it: the slightly too bright kitchen, the slightly too quiet dinner conversation, the generic cereal in the 4,000 square foot house. The way money never quite drifted into the conversation because there was a tightness there nobody wanted to touch. They own a beautiful thing they are too financially strained to enjoy, and they will spend the next 30 years paying for the privilege. Cab could have bought that house twice over in cash. He stayed in a 3-bedroom in an older neighborhood with gutters that could use cleaning, because the small payment is precisely what kept his money free to keep growing. From the street, their house looks like success, and Cab's looks like settling. On the balance sheet, the large house is among the single most common reasons hardworking people reach 50 with nothing. It did not make them rich. It made them broke with a beautiful kitchen and a quiet ache they could never quite explain. The rule: a house purchased at the edge of what income allows is not an asset. It is a monthly subtraction disguised as an accomplishment. The size of the house and the size of the freedom it permits are almost always inversely related past a certain threshold, and almost nobody calculates that threshold before they sign for it. This is where people misread Cab completely, because the habit was never about being cheap. Watch where his money actually goes. He will drive a car for 9 years and refuse to replace a phone that still works, and in the same week write a check for his granddaughter's college fund without hesitating, ruthless on the things nobody sees, generous on the things that last. You have stood on the other side of this. You have paid full price for the version with the logo and called it treating yourself. Be honest about what it actually bought you. A moment of being seen, and the moment was over before you got back to the car. Money spent on appearing a certain way is gone the instant it leaves your hand. Money spent on something real is still working 30 years later. So Cab starves the budget everyone can see and feeds the one nobody can. To Cab, paying extra for the logo feels like being robbed in slow motion while everyone smiles and calls it a reward. One crowd spends an entire life buying the costume. Cab quietly bought the thing the costume was only ever pretending to represent. The rule, the discipline that builds wealth, is never evenly distributed across a life. It is concentrated entirely on the things that depreciate and entirely absent from the things that compound or matter. Frugality applied everywhere is a trap of its own. Frugality applied precisely is the entire strategy. Cab is not a monk. He is not building toward a large account and a small, gray life he never allowed himself to enjoy. The habit was only ever a tool for one specific job, getting the gap wide enough, early enough, that the money eventually does the heavy lifting instead of him. Once that machine exists and is running, spending on the things that genuinely improve a life is not a betrayal of the habit. It is the entire reason the habit existed in the first place. Cab flies now instead of enduring the 12-hour drive. He paid without flinching to be in the room when his grandchildren were born. He buys the good boots that last 15 years and the plane ticket to the people he loves. The entire philosophy fits in one sentence: spend freely on what genuinely makes your life better. Refuse to spend on what only makes your life look better to people who were never really watching. The first is the reward the habit was built to eventually pay out. The second is the trap it was built to help him avoid. Cab is not allergic to spending money. He is allergic to spending it for the wrong audience. That is what nobody sees when they look at the man in the old Accord and feel sorry for him. He isn't trapped. He is the only one in that parking lot who isn't. The rule, the goal of frugality was never frugality. It was optionality. The person who understands this spends generously, eventually, on a short list of things that compound in meaning, even if they don't compound in dollars, and refuses everything else with the same quiet consistency that built the account in the first place. None of this is free. Cab would be the first to say so. The habit costs something real. It simply doesn't cost money. It costs the way people look at you. You become the one who keeps the old car while the group trades up. The one who says no to the trip. The one who brings lunch. The one who doesn't have the thing everyone else just financed. People notice. Someone makes the joke that is really a question. A relative quietly decides you must be struggling, and you sit there knowing the truth and saying nothing, because there is nothing you could say that wouldn't sound like either bragging or lying. You know this feeling if you've ever tried it. A brother-in-law gets a bonus and buys the thing he's been talking about for months. For 3 weeks, he is genuinely, visibly happy. Then he's just a guy with a thing and a payment, already eyeing the next one. You watch it happen. You don't say a word, because nothing you could say would land right. That ache, that quiet not saying, is the real tax on Cab's habit, not dollars. The slow social cost of looking slightly behind, paid at dinners and reunions for years at a time. And most people simply cannot afford to pay it, even though it costs them nothing financially. The fear of looking like you're failing is, for most people, stronger than the wish to actually win. Cab made his peace with looking behind a long time ago. He did the honest math on what being admired actually costs, and decided the silence was the cheaper purchase. The rule: the hardest cost in this entire strategy is not financial discipline. It is social tolerance for appearing to be behind while privately being ahead. Most people who abandon the habit do not abandon it because the math stopped working. They abandon it because the silence got too loud to sit inside. Underneath the car and the house and the packed lunch, there is one thing about Cab that almost nobody can copy, and it has nothing to do with discipline. Cab genuinely does not care what you think of him. not as a practice stance, not as something he is working on. He is simply free of a weight that quietly bends almost every other person's entire financial life. He does not need the room to notice the watch. He stopped keeping that particular scoreboard so long ago that he has mostly forgotten it exists, and you can feel it standing near him, a kind of stillness most people never get close to. Here is what that freedom is worth in plain dollars. The moment a person stops needing to perform, an enormous amount of spending simply vanishes. The upgrade purchase so someone would notice. The round of drinks grabbed so you'd seem generous. The outfit bought for the one night you saw a particular group and never saw them again. One widely cited survey found the average person spends $400 to $500 a month on things they don't need, kept up and financed in monthly installments, spent for an audience that was never really watching. Most people make financial decisions based on the imagined opinion of people who are themselves one missed paycheck from their own disaster, which is in effect taking swimming lessons from someone who is drowning. Cab climbed out of that pool decades ago. He is not braver than anyone else in that building. He is not smarter. He simply stopped competing in a race that has no finish line and never once paid $1 to anyone still running it. The rule status spending is a tax levied by an audience that, in most cases, does not actually exist in the form being imagined. The people you are performing for are occupied calculating their own position relative to yours. The performance is, almost always, for no one. The money spent on it is real. If Cab's habit is this powerful, why does almost nobody keep it? Because it is hardest to hold at the exact moment it finally starts to pay. Two men were hired into the same company, the same week, same job, same starting salary. Call them Ray and Tom. Ray celebrated the new job the way he was taught to. He leased a car that matched the title, signed for an apartment that stretched him to the edge, upgraded the phone on schedule and the wardrobe on trend, always half a step ahead of every raise. For years, Ray looked like the one who was winning. At the company parties, by every visible measure, he was. Tom kept driving the car he already owned, parked most mornings a few spots down from a quiet older man in a 2013 Accord. He split a modest apartment and routed a fifth of every paycheck into investments before the money ever touched his checking account. For years, Tom looked like the one who never quite arrived. Then life did the thing life eventually does. A bad quarter, a reorganization. On one ordinary Tuesday, Ray and Tom received the same envelope on the same desk, same layoff, same severance. And in that single moment, 10 years of invisible difference became the only thing in the room that mattered. Ray had almost nothing saved and a stack of payments that did not pause simply because his income had. Within 3 weeks, he took the first job that called on their terms, because the obligations never stopped to ask how he was doing. Tom had a cushion deep enough to breathe inside. He took a few months. He turned down 2 offers that weren't right. He accepted the one that was, on his own timeline. Same salary the entire way, same town. The only difference was that one of them spent a decade buying the appearance of wealth, and the other spent it quietly buying the thing itself. The rule: the gap between the visible version of 2 financial lives and the real version of them is invisible until the moment something forces it into the open. A layoff, an emergency, a sudden need for leverage. The habit is hardest to keep precisely because its payoff is hardest to see, right up until the day it is the only thing that matters. The largest thing Cab built, he will never personally see finished, because it does not arrive within his lifetime. It arrives in his children and in theirs. Picture 2 children at 2 different dinner tables. At the first table, money is a tight, quiet subject, the thing the parents argue about in low voices after the kids are supposed to be asleep. That child learns, without a single explicit lesson, that money is fear, and that the way you prove you are okay is to buy something other people can see. They inherit the anxiety the way they inherit an heirloom nobody asked for. At Cab's table, the car is paid off, the raise gets invested, and the word equity gets used as casually as passing the salt. That child grows up watching calm, watching a gap that quietly grows in the background, watching 2 parents who are simply not afraid. That child starts their entire life from a place Cab had to spend decades climbing toward. The ceiling Cab spent most of his adult life pushing against is simply not there for them. They will likely never even know it existed. That is what the man in the old Accord is actually building. Not a number, a different starting line for somebody who has not been born yet. The rule: the gap does not end with the person who built it. It becomes the floor the next generation starts on instead of the ceiling they have to climb toward. This is the part of the habit that cannot be measured in any single account, and it is, by a wide margin, the most valuable part of it. Tomorrow morning, Cab parks the Accord at the far end of the lot again, in the spot nobody else wants. He walks past people who still quietly feel sorry for him. He eats the lunch he packed. He says no thanks to the offered slice. He lets every one of them keep believing he is the one who never quite made it. And he is, by a distance none of them could imagine, the freest person in that building. Here is the only question that actually matters. When your income goes up, does your life quietly rise to meet it, or does it hold still while the gap underneath it grows? Almost everyone asked directly says they would keep the habit. Almost no one does. The world will keep insisting the upgrade is the reward, that the new thing is what arriving looks like. That living below your means is something you graduate out of once you can finally afford not to. It is, by a wide margin, the most expensive advice most people will ever take without questioning it. The flashy ones are performing a future, the quiet ones are building one, and from the outside you genuinely cannot tell them apart. That is exactly how the quiet ones prefer it.